Hello everyone, my name is Michael Sweeney and I'm Head of Marketing here at Clearcode. In today's video, I'm joined by Anne Hand, who is the Chairwoman and CEO of Super League, and we're going to be talking about in-game advertising and the Metaverse. So Anne, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. So before we jump into the questions, Anne, just tell us a little bit about yourself and what Super League does.
Yeah, gosh, there's a lot to say about myself, but I don't know if it's that exciting to anybody else. I guess probably the thing that career-wise people kind of latch onto is the diversity of my background. I spent close to 20 years in large companies, specifically energy and retail companies like BP and McDonald's. And then I kind of took a little bit of a wild leap into early stage companies, first running a clean tech business and now running one that's in the gaming and entertainment sector. And so I spent a lot of my early career or early time in these roles kind of apologizing or feeling I had to over-explain those kind of several hops in my CV. But now I've just decided that it's a positive thing and that I'm versatile, and I've kind of moved on from that. And it does just prove that business is business, right? And you're solving problems and you're applying very similar toolkits to those problems, regardless of the industry or size of the business. And Super League is a company that's been around for about 8 years. And it was really the original premise that really kind of grabbed me and got me excited about it was the opportunity to really debunk the myth of who an everyday gamer is these days. To latch on to the fact that gaming is now a lifestyle trend. It's something people aren't growing out of. And to find a new way to really help advertisers and brands talk to this young consumer base, which really does represent a lot of the consumers that brands are seeking, and just educate them on the fact that a gamer is their customer too.
Yeah, perfect. Sounds good. So yeah, I definitely agree with you that, coming from, a different industry is probably in many cases a positive thing, because you get fresh set of eyes, you get to see things from different perspectives that a lot of people that have worked within a certain industry for a while don't see. So yeah, definitely agree with you on that. So yeah, thanks very much for the intro about Super League. Just got a couple of follow-up questions about Super League itself. I noticed that on your website and just sort of doing a bit of a dig around, reading some other articles about Super League, is that you guys have a kind of connection with Minecraft and Roblox, right? The two very popular gaming environments. So just tell us a little bit more about Super League's connection with those two environments, because from what I understand, Super League has, I guess, many different pillars of your business, right? You guys are one part kind of game creator, maybe another part like AdTech company. I think you guys have your own advertising platforms. You got a studio option as well for ad creation. So yeah, just kind of expand on the connection between Super League, Minecraft, and Roblox.
Yeah, so I'd say first, to your point, we have really two primary things that we provide for brands and advertisers. The first is an opportunity to create immersive game experiences inside game worlds on top of platforms like Minecraft and Roblox, and I'll talk about our relationship there in just a moment. And the second thing, as you mentioned, is we have a set of very innovative, native, intrinsic in-game ad products that is another avenue that we can bring advertisers into the landscape of these games. And often what we find is the power of Super League is brands want both. They want the experiential kind of product placement on steroids moment inside these game worlds, and they want it augmented with on-platform media products that allow us to really drive exponentially more traffic into that experience and deliver really off-the-charts types of engagement and ROI. Our roots of starting really with Minecraft started in the early days of the company, when we were saying, well, where are our kids? If we're going to focus on kid gamers, what we saw was that most of them were playing Minecraft. And what was great about Minecraft is that it has the underpinnings of STEM. It's a very parent-friendly game because your kids are learning about coding. Now, first, we really focused on that competitive gamer because that's who we thought, that hardcore avid gamer, that's what they look like. But over time, the more that we worked with Minecraft, our eyes were kind of opened up to the fact that actually, a lot of the kids were in there not for competition. They were in there to create. The power of open world platforms like Minecraft and Roblox is it puts the tools in the hands of the everyday players. And so what it means is that they get to create their own game experiences. And just as much, many of them are there not even just to create or to compete, but they also want to socialize. It's really just an extension of their physical life. It's like a digital cul-de-sac or playground or hangout spot. And so the more we learned through working with Minecraft in the early days, the more we started to say, we really want to double down on where we think the world's going, which is more of these open world types of games where the player themselves gets to change the landscape of the game. And we just saw that as really empowering and sticky and exciting. And that led to our jump into Roblox starting a few years ago. And we now reach over 100 million monthly unique players in those two platforms combined. So we've been able, by really focusing on that type of a genre of game platform, we've been able to really get depth and scale, which is what the advertisers seek.
Perfect. So just another kind of follow-up question there. So with regards to the ad platforms that you guys have, where brands can show ads inside these games, is it kind of generally that you would show ads inside your own games that you create, or are they showing ads across many different games in those environments?
Yeah, it's a good question. The power of what Super League's built is this tech and capability backbone, so to speak. And it's a tech and capability backbone that we are applying to these platforms like Minecraft and Roblox. So what it means, if you could imagine, almost like a solar system, right? If Super League's ad tech and capability is the sun of that universe, then what we do is we operate some of our own mini game worlds or planets that are plugged into that technology, that backbone. But it's also an opportunity for anybody who develops an exciting mini game world or planet in those platforms to as well tether onto our backbone. What that means is they get a whole set of analytics to make their planet or our mini game world more robust and exciting and monetizable for their own kind of needs. But also it means they can participate in our ad economy. So now if you kind of stand back and you imagine this kind of wider solar system, we have hundreds of games plugged into that universe that we operate, and we control the pathways between the game worlds too. And so when we talk about bringing brands into games, either through those immersive experiences or their brands into those through those in-game ad products, we're able to find the appropriate set of game worlds that really speak to the kind of target they're seeking, right? Because a Barbie girl's different than a Hot Wheels boy. And so we select from our universe what is the right network of games that will give the advertiser the type of audience that they're seeking in a very targeted way. And so that's kind of the power of how we've been able to aggregate and get scale, is because this underpinning of creating great creator tools and a creator economy has really incentivized all the creators inside this greater platform to have a participation, a piece of the upside by joining into the Super League network.
Perfect. Sounds good. So just a kind of a side question here, because obviously you mentioned before that I guess especially with, as you said, with environments like Minecraft, you mentioned, Hot Wheels, Barbie, that kind of thing. Obviously the audience is children, right? And there's obviously a lot of difference, depends which country, which state you're in. There's state you live in America, for example, there's different regulations around showing advertising to children. So is that kind of a challenge that you face as a company that provides advertising, predominantly targeted towards children, or is it kind of like, there would be specific brands whose target audiences are children, and there's not those kind of barriers that you would face in other environments, right? Because it's, I guess the brands themselves would know what the restrictions are, for example, when it comes to advertising towards children. Is it kind of like that? Is the difference kind of a bit nuanced where it's not so much of an issue?
It's both, really. The what you said, your last point, we served over 100 brands last year. These are sophisticated global brands, and so they know and have their own kind of sets of guardrails around the audiences that they're trying to reach and want to reach, and it's appropriate to reach. Also, one of the hallmarks of Super League, because we've always stood for not just inclusive, safe, positive gaming and debunking that myth of who a player is, as I mentioned earlier, it's always been as well about, a safe marketing channel. And so COPA compliant, We have our Kid Safe certification. Those are kind of hallmarks that the brand is kind of known as a trusted place to put marketing dollars. And to your point, that said, we as well can ensure that a brand who wants to reach an over 13 audience, we're directing them that way, right? And so it's got to be the appropriate brand. And again, the sophistication of the brands that we're working with, they've already kind of got that high bar they've set for themselves. And then that's the power of us really understanding our network and making sure that we're putting that advertising appropriately in front of an audience that is considered 13 and over.
Yeah, perfect. Awesome. So obviously, Super League's been around since 2014, I believe, and you've been at the company since 2015. So, what have been some of the main changes and, I guess, trends within the in-game advertising industry over those years? Because gaming in advertising in games has been around since games were around, pretty much, with things like product placement and that kind of stuff. But I think it's only been the past few years that the whole in-game advertising industry has really picked up speed, and there's been a lot of press coverage about in-game advertising over the past few years. So, what have been some of the changes and trends that you've noticed over those years working at a company that is in this industry?
Yeah, in the early days, we were focusing much more, as I mentioned earlier, on that competitive gamer, and so we were thinking much more. We were kind of dragging off that trend of esports, and the establishment of professional teams and leagues and tournaments, and we were thinking a lot about amateur leagues, for kids and young adults. And so again, a tighter focus on that kind of more hardcore gamer. And then we kind of started to go through that journey and realized that our safe and positive brand positioning was actually a distinctive place to stand, that we had a point of view about, again, positive gaming, that gaming can be good for you in the right context, that we really felt was a leading position. And by choosing that path, it really meant that we were going to be focusing more on these games that are just as much about creation and socialization. And if you understand a lot of the game worlds inside Minecraft and Roblox, you'll know that many of them, there aren't points and winners and losers. That's not the way the games are designed. They're role-playing games. There are games where it's much more, again, about the socialization aspects. So the company started to really say, let's focus more on these types of worlds. And what we really saw too is a bigger trend, which is that more and more the younger audience was going to crave these types of game worlds where they can change the landscape and be a part of making the game. And so we decided to focus more fully on those, but then widen the net and say, we want to talk to all kids who love to game, not just the hardcore competitive ones. So that's a pretty significant set of shifts that the company did to kind of narrow into the genre of games that are open world platform, but then really widen the net of saying we want to talk to all of them, not just the competitive ones. What happened too in the landscape of the ad world through that process is, because we were starting in the early days, and we were small, right? We didn't have real scale. So the only way advertisers were going to come and put dollars to work with us was really more because there was a lot of brand alignment, and they saw the promise of what could be over time. So companies like Logitech spent money as a top-down sponsor with us, trying to get to young kids and their parents. Nickelodeon as well, Cinemark Theaters. What's interesting about those three names I mentioned just there is at the same time they became investors in us. And that just shows all the more in some ways that their sponsorship was almost more just putting a toe in the water. And we weren't going to materially change their marketing strategy for the year, but they saw the future of where things were going, and they wanted that opportunity to invest in us and collaborate. In fact, it just got announced today that we won a Webby Award with Paramount and MTV, one of our investors, for a red carpet experience we recreated for the Video Music Awards last year for MTV in the Metaverse. So it's kind of fun, 5 years later, to see that those things that look like small sponsorships have turned into, material important parts of their marketing strategies. And because we were also more narrowly looking at that kind of esports category in those earliest days, we were mimicking what we were seeing with the professional esports team layer, even though, of course, we weren't going to attract the kinds of dollars they could because we didn't have all of those giant viewership numbers. But certainly we were much more sponsorship focused. And what's changed now is instead of being event focused or tournament focused and sponsorship focused, we're really talking about 24/7 persistent worlds and volume of players that allows us to now create some really exciting temporal experiences, but instead of them lasting an hour or 2 hours, they can last weeks or longer, and as well augment them with those very clever in-game ad products. And when I talk about in-game ad products, we're not talking about pop-up banners. We're not talking about things that interrupt the gameplay or jump in front of the player. We're talking about, again, native products baked into the landscape. Maybe it's SpongeBob off in the distance standing under a tree in the game, and it's your opportunity, if you choose, to go over and talk to him. Or maybe off in the distance of a cityscape, there's a dynamic billboard that has a funny meme on it. It's your choice to go over and decide if you want to view that content, just like when you're driving down a street in real life, the billboards don't jump out in the road in front of you. And so that distinction of these very engaging ad products that we believe enhance the game experience and don't interrupt or block it is a distinction from what you see classically when people talk about in-game advertising. Even mobile game advertising tends to be pop-up banners and overrides and things that you have to kind of opt out of or move to continue your gameplay.
Definitely. I think that's an incredibly important point that you just made there about the difference between, pure in-game ads and ads that, traditional banner ads or pop-up ads that you would see, for example, on a mobile game. I think that's quite an important distinction to make when talking about in-game advertising versus, in-app advertising, which is a kind of different format in industry. So yeah, it's quite important distinction you made there. Just a quick question around the esports part that you just mentioned before, because as you said that Super League started, with the sponsorship of esport tournaments, etc. Is that still a part of your business, or is it something that you've kind of moved away from that a little bit into other areas? But is it still something that Super League is involved in?
Well, so here's how it happens now. So when we were doing some of that esports work in the earliest days, we were a small company. And so a lot of the power of esports was creating great broadcast. And so we have some proprietary tech, a fully remote virtual production room that we can do a very high quality tournament live broadcast that has minimal audio, video lag, like millisecond. And it's special enough that we continue to use it for all kinds of use cases. Last year, we did a pretty big activation with Samsung Galaxy with the Charlie XCX pop concert inside one of our Roblox worlds. And they don't want just the players to get to see Charlie XCX sing in her Metaverse avatar, persona. They want the live feed because they want the great broadcast to put on their Twitch channel and Samsung.com for all the people who like Samsung and Charlie XCX, but maybe aren't Roblox players. And we were the company that could very affordably at a super high quality provide them that broadcast. In fact, that event was up for an MTV VMA award for the best Metaverse concert. So we still use that technology. And then back to your earlier question, when a brand comes to us and says, you know what, for obvious reasons, it could be an alcohol bev brand or Red Bull or just somebody who's just, targeting an older demographic. If they're looking for like an over 18 demographic, we'll take some of that tournament tech and broadcast tech, and we can still deliver them a solution that helps them reach an older gamer. So it's not the core kind of where we have the largest audience numbers, but it's certainly a capability that we're known for. And we have companies we've worked with for years, like Topgolf, who has fantastic physical golf facilities, fun places, entertainment golf, locations, but they also own a golf video game called World Golf Tour. And they want to reach and engage with their audiences beyond when they visit their physical sites. And so we run monthly broadcast tournaments for them and for others.
Yep. Sounds good. Cool. So you've touched on this topic a second ago with Roblox, but I wanted to ask a couple of questions now about the metaverse, because obviously it's a very hot topic and a bit of a buzzword over the past few years. So, I think with I guess the question is what is the definition, or what is your definition of the metaverse? Because there are some people out there that say that the metaverse isn't really here yet, because one of the fundamental pillars of the metaverse is interoperability between different virtual worlds, right? It's kind of, people say that the metaverse is essentially just a virtual world, that mimics your real life. So, what is kind of your definition of the metaverse, and what are kind of some of the examples, I guess, of what you've seen?
Yeah, I try not to really limit myself into thinking it has to be the complete max definition of full interoperability. And I talk a lot to CMOs and also my investors, because they get a little kind of turned off by, in many ways, kind of, the unfortunate kind of missteps of some of, other companies that have gone into the metaverse, and maybe perhaps a little too boldly, thinking they could live into that max definition faster than is really possible. And here's the truth. The truth is your physical life isn't fully interoperable anyway. You can actually move your music from Apple to somewhere else. So this notion that full interoperability, there's plenty of ways we operate in all kinds of, walled gardens today. And so to me, I look at that notion of full interoperability and I think, hey, could it happen? Will a lot of really smart people try to think about how it could happen? Sure. But I don't think it's happening in the next 5 or 10 years. And the reason is just because the amount of cooperation, regulation that would be required, it's astounding. And so, to first get people to want to share their customers, share their data, share and put at risk their own profits for sake of directing them elsewhere to competitors. I mean, that's asking a lot. Now, could I see a couple players jumping off and trying to build a use case by showing interoperability between them? Could Facebook and Microsoft attempt to do something? Or maybe. But this notion of a fully integrated world, to me, we're many years away from. What I try to talk a lot to, again, brands and investors about is I say, look, here's the thing, and this is the way I think of the metaverse, right? And it just so happens it started in gaming, but it's kind of like forget gaming in a way. So, in gaming, you can create your own custom avatar, and you can traverse in virtual worlds that can mimic things you can do in real life. You can go to a concert, you can play soccer, you can do all kinds of things. And because it's very customized and personalized, it has a lot of ways that it replicates your physical self. And if you ask a young person today, tell me about your physical versus digital self, they don't really see them as separate things. They see them as an extension. And in fact, if anything, a digital self is a place where you can experiment more. I can change my hairstyle 5 times in a day, in an hour. I can kind of test the boundaries of my physical persona and interests. So there's something really empowering about it. So then another trend that I think is important to kind of define in my terms what the metaverse is just the way screens are changing so fast in our lives. They're getting smarter. So, for example, if you've seen a 4K TV, I mean, gosh, it makes you feel like you're watching that soccer match or you're more in that concert. And you don't need a VR headset to have that really amazing 2D experience, And so what I say to brands often is, when I think of the interactions that we can create for them inside worlds, those kind of Web 2.0 interactions where we can create a very immersive experience for players to go into these experiences and feel that experience of that concert or playing inside Barbie's dream house. That is, in my opinion, kind of a first step of metaverse. And whether you fully believe in or you even understand blockchain and crypto and all that, that can still just be built on the existing financial economy that we have. So in my opinion, we're already in the metaverse inside these existing game platforms. And I think what's going to happen, why I talk so much about the smarter screens, is look at the .com experience in general. Just go to any website out there. Most websites still kind of look like the website that was built in 2000. They really haven't evolved that much. And yet again, our expectations for a more intimate experience are shifting. So to me, what I'm excited about with Super League is that smart backbone of tech and capability that we just so happen to be applying right now in these game engines. We are starting to have conversations with brands and saying, now what if we took that same tech and started transforming your .com experience? What if when you went to these websites, you did have a much more personalized shopping experience, a more intimate way for that feels customized and personalized? And to me, 2.5 web is right around the corner. It's here now. And again, that's not dependent on interoperability, and it's not dependent on the blockchain.
Excellent. Yeah, you made some fantastic points there, because obviously as I said, the metaverse definition is a kind of point of contention, I guess, as well. And I totally agree. I think it's I don't think it's kind of valuable to kind of get too bogged down in the definition of the metaverse. I think it's more important, as you said, to especially for brands and agencies, to look at the opportunities that exist now, rather than kind of wait for the metaverse to kind of evolve, because you would have missed the opportunity. So yeah, totally agree there. So just regarding the whole metaverse and brands. So have you started to see more brands come to you and say, we want to start getting involved in the metaverse? We want to start testing it out. Have you kind of seen a lot of demand from advertisers to kind of test the waters of the metaverse?
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, we served over 100 brands last year. How it usually starts, the arc of the conversations, and sometimes it will come from the brand itself or maybe their agency, but there'll be a larger campaign or objective. And a piece of the RFP will be saying, because we're targeting this young kind of gaming audience, what are different ways that we can have this be a component of a larger campaign? And so we find that, with a lot of brands, they kind of first dip their toe in and need to kind of get that education going about this very innovative alternative way to reach these audiences and get that deep engagement. And then what typically happens is once they get a taste of it, it starts to become just a core part of every one of their campaigns going forward. So we have probably about 10 brands last year that when you add up all their activations, they did well north of $1 million of business with us. But, it might be Universal, and a piece might be for the Minions movie release, and then for the Bad Guys release, and separate movie releases. And then we have other brands who understand the space much better, and they're putting $1 million plus to work with us for singular campaigns. So kind of the old adage of advertising, the more scale, and again, with that kind of education curve that the brand has to go through, the more share of wallet that we can take. So we're already seeing that kind of big change happening. And then I think what's exciting is it's one thing to say, okay, I get it that the audience is moved, and I need to go where the audience is. Nobody disputes that the numbers are astounding. You've got hundreds of millions of gamers deeply engaged in these open world platforms. I think some stats I saw recently is, the average time in these open world platforms is like 7.5 hours a week, as compared to about 5.5 hours on social media. So then the bell starts to go off, I think, for brands to say, wait a minute, I need to stop thinking about this as, oh, I've got my media spend and what I'm going to do on traditional digital, and then I've got this gaming thing. No, this is just a new social channel. And the question becomes, how do you allocate across all of those digital channels? Because in many ways, again, this isn't gaming by the traditional definition many of us have. It is just where people are hanging out and congregating and influencing each other. And so once I think the brand gets their head around that, it starts to become a different conversation about, how do I want to look at my annual program, and no longer by campaign, But how do I think about my media mix differently so that I have the appropriate share going into this new social channel, just the same way I had to shift my dollars around 10 years ago or 15 years ago with, the advancement of social media channels. This is just a new one that is now vying for those dollars, and those dollars are starting to shift over in more material ways.
Yeah, cool. So just regarding the actual in-game ads, because obviously you just mentioned before that, advertisers are starting to incorporate in-game advertising the metaverse as part of their media mix. But I guess there'd probably be a little bit more work involved in actually creating the creatives that would be shown in an in-game ad versus, ads shown on a social media post or, banner ads on a website, right? So, do brands kind of understand that in-game advertising and advertising the metaverse is quite different in terms of the actual creative that you show, and are they kind of prepared to invest that more time, more money in actually creating something that is part of the immersive experience rather than just a pop-up banner as you would see on in other channels?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that two ways. It's very relevant to real conversations I'm having right now with kind of global heads of media of some of the biggest brands that we know out there. The first thing at a real macro level, and this is what they're saying to me, is I'm hearing, listen, traditional digital media isn't working for me anymore. It's one of the largest shares of the pie of my investment globally, but I'm not getting the audience that kind of 15-second spot used to get me on, say YouTube or Facebook or what have you. And I know I need to move my dollars. I know where the audience is. I can see it. I can see the numbers that they're on these game platforms, but I've got to get my head around it because the measurement's different. Now, to your question about, and that's a real question. And by the way, the content's different too, because right, if we built for Mattel a big Barbie Dreamhouse pop-up experience, and then in other games we have 3D non-playing character Barbies hanging out in the landscape of games, promoting and talking to people about her dream house, that's very different than a banner ad, right? So it's a different type of content and it's different measurement because it's not clickable in the same way. I would say to your question about the length and cost, if you're going to create Barbie's dream house, a pop-up dream house experience, I mean, that's a world where you can go in and you can DJ on the roof deck and swim in the pool outside and try on clothes on the second floor. Yes, there is a game development and investment in that. And that has, a 1 to 2 month lead time, and it's a different type of investment. And in there it is that, as I said earlier, that product placement on steroids. It's more akin to like what the old Saturday morning cartoon TV spot used to do for a brand like Mattel. I mean, it's really about building deep, engagement, awareness, to an excitement to Barbie. It's kind of top of the funnel stuff. Now, on the alternative, when I talk about those 3D non-playing characters or digital billboards or things like that, those media products, they don't have a significantly different amount of creation cost or time as any other type of graphic ad. And so that's exciting to brands that they see that scales. That can really scale. And so the pop-up experiential complemented by scalable media products is kind of like the 1-2 punch, so to speak. Now, I'll tease you a little bit with another fun conversation that I'm having with brands, and I'll just use the Barbie Dreamhouse to illustrate. Barbie's Dreamhouse was up for 30 days for the month of October last year, celebrating the anniversary of Barbie's Dreamhouse. We delivered 60 million visits to that Dreamhouse and had average dwell time 7-8 minutes long. So off the charts engagement. So it's a very successful activation. And a little bit of my cheeky joke with some of the executives at Mattel on November 1st was like, how sad. Barbie's Dreamhouse just got razed. It's gone. It got demolished. It's over. It's no longer in the landscape of that game. And so while it completely fulfilled, and then some, its marketing objectives, there was work and time put in there that really you could start to ask the question, why wouldn't that be a permanent virtual billboard? In this case, it would be an experiential billboard, so to speak, that can be rotating all year long, different types of things tied to other types of Barbie activations. Barbie is all year long releasing new plastic dolls, and those dolls can have their 3D virtual twin be hanging out in the dream house for a month prior to the physical release to really test how excited are kids about these different doll characters that are coming out, what's the interest in them, and just simply promote them that they're coming soon to the stores near you. So it is starting to change a bit, that people can start to see that one investment that has that higher lead time or cost to it actually maybe becoming a persistent billboard or asset to extend for a much longer life.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I think you touched on some really important points there about the differences between in-game advertising and other channels is the engagement part, right? And, as you said before, brands saying that the traditional media channels are not working for them. I think in most part, there's obviously quite a few different reasons for that, I guess, but I think particularly when we think about web advertising, advertisements on websites, even on mobile apps, there's this, phenomenon of banner blindness, right? And I guess that's kind of even creeping into some of the social media sites. I mean, myself, I don't spend a lot of time on social media, but if I'm flicking through an Instagram, for example, and I come across an ad, I can kind of always tell that it's a sponsored ad, even without actually looking at the sponsored title. It's kind of just, I just keep on scrolling. So I think that's even kind of creeping into even some of the, newer channels as well. So I think the in-game advertising part, as you mentioned before, about the experiences, it's highly engaging for the audiences, and it's kind of not more, it's obviously there's an advertising promotional element to it, but it's there's so much more than that. It kind of takes on a new role for brands. So yeah, very, very interesting stuff there.
There are a lot of studies out there showing exactly what, that scroll fatigue that you're talking about, and the fact that our eyes are getting trained to skip ads.
Yes.
So, it's a real thing that, and I felt it the same. And so, and that's though the exciting next challenge for the end game side is just how do we appropriately help advertisers understand, the measurement for that and what to expect from that. So it's not hype and just big numbers thrown around, but it's legitimate building of preference and loyalty and ultimately conversion into their products. And so just like any new alternative marketing channel, as it comes into the fray, it has its challenges, no different from going from radio to TV to cable to digital. They all had to overcome both a shift perhaps in the content and in the measurement and just understanding the landscape and what to expect.
Yep, definitely. So you've just touched on the next question I have there, which is about measurement. Obviously, it's a very key part, very important point for advertisers and brands. They want to know whether an ad that they ran or whatever they've done had some kind of impact, right? So recently, things like last year, the IAB Tech Lab released its measurement standards for in-game advertising. Have you seen has that kind of had an impact on your business, on the kinds of conversations that you've been having with brands now that there is a kind of standard for them to be able to measure some of the in-game ads? Because I guess, going back maybe in a few years ago, was the lack of, measurement capabilities a bit of a barrier for some brands? And has the introduction of the IAB Tech Lab's standards helped overcome those obstacles for brands in some way?
I think it's definitely helped, and I think that IAB plays a really critical role here. I think the reality is that while it's the beginning and it's a baseline, it's still different. And what I'm finding is because advertisers are trying to move dollars from one budget of traditional digital marketing, which is, in their opinion, again, kind of failing them. That's why you're seeing the ad numbers for Facebook and others down. But they're struggling because they all have their own media mix formula, right? And they're struggling because they're trying to move dollars to something that measures differently. And so, look, other more traditional forms of advertising figured out a way over time to solve for it. You watched, when I was a kid, if I watched a commercial on, the television, there were formulas and ways to triangulate and see if there was an uptick in real life Barbie doll sales because I had seen that ad. Now, none of that was perfect. I couldn't click on that TV ad. It wasn't a direct, clear link, but there were ways to infer the effectiveness of that marketing spend. And I think that is really going to be the key is continuing to do more than just even what the initial measurement standards have done, and really showing advertisers that their investment is translating more into their real life marketing objectives. And so I think that's the key. I mean, look, I understand why, companies in walled gardens, like a Roblox and a Minecraft. I mean, look, they've built these beautiful, amazing platforms and tools, and controlling that first party data and that economy. All those reasons make complete sense to me. However, I also think there's such a rich opportunity to allow the brand or advertiser who wants to be there, because that's where the audience is, to have ways to drive physical conversion. I think is a really exciting way those platforms can continue to evolve. And that, to me, will be the holy grail. That'll be the opportunity to make it really a no-brainer, because the effectiveness of the campaigns from an engagement perspective, as we said earlier, they're off the charts. And the sentiment we're able to get when you can talk to a Barbie character and she can ask you questions and you can understand, your excitement. I even say to brands, don't ever do another focus group in real life again. Especially if you're a young brand, don't go 3D print, a new toy. Drop it into one of the game worlds in a digital form. We can drop it in within less than 2 hours of work. Drop in a 3D model of maybe 5 different games or toys that you're experimenting with, and let's let the audience speak right there and then. No supply chain, no cogs, no costly R&D testing. So I do think it will change as well, not just the way that these big brands will market and drive their kind of higher P&L objectives, but I think it'll just become a different way they engage. And just like the platforms allow everybody to be a creator, the brand is a creator, and the brand can use their consumers to co-create kind of the future, toy lines, IP, branded products, what have you.
Perfect. Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting use case of in-game advertising. You mentioned there before about product testing. I think that's a great example of some of the other opportunities. I guess not so much the obvious ones, but that definitely sounds good. So yeah, excellent. Well, Anne, that's pretty much all the questions I had today. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, just thank you for having me. It's been fun talking to you, Michael.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much for joining me today. And if anyone wants to get in touch with yourself, obviously I'll leave links to Super League's website, your LinkedIn account, maybe even Twitter as well. If you want to get in touch and learn more about Super League, that's the way to do it. So yeah, and once again, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great getting your insights on in-game advertising in the metaverse. So thank you so much.
Thank you.